It's going to be interesting to see how the DCU plans to incorporate a new Batman on the big screen in a way audiences have never really seen before, or in a way that hasn't been attempted in a long time. Do you know how boring it would be to see yet another Batman that's grounded in realism or is still figuring out how to operate as a crime fighter, despite the fact that this is the same continuity with metahumans, monsters, and Green Lanterns? It would also make no logical sense to have a younger Batman, considering Damian Wayne is being introduced in The Brave and the Bold, who is usually depicted as a 10-year-old when Talia al Ghul brings him to Batman's doorstep. While all of this is happening, you also have Matt Reeves' universe thriving with The Batman Part 2 slated to release in late 2026. Although I wouldn't be surprised if the movie got delayed a bit, since Matt Reeves apparently hasn't submitted a full draft of the film's script, rather turning in huge chunks of the script he's written. But he sure is taking his sweet time with that Batman 2 plot, but I guess we just gotta let him do his thing in order for the movie to come out right.
Hold on, my nigga, let me cook. Let me cook, my nigga.
I doubt they'd want two different live-action Batman movies releasing so close to one another, so don't expect The Brave and the Bold to release in 2026 or something. Not to mention the script for the movie is nowhere near complete, and a big initiative of the DCU is to not go forward in the development process like casting until the scripts are done. With Matt Reeves' Batman sequel getting closer and closer to actually coming out, that gives DC Studios even more incentive to take their time in introducing the DCU's Batman. I'm really curious to see the general audience's reaction to all of this, whether or not people will be confused on seeing two live-action Batman simultaneously. Personally, I don't think it'll be all that complicated as long as they do a good job in establishing the key differences between the two versions. One obviously being more grounded, detective noir driven, incorporating villains that never really delve into the fantastical all that much, while the other version is more experienced, works with the Justice League, has a family of proteges, maybe a costume that has a more vibrant visual aesthetic, perhaps even a suit with wide eyes if they want to go full comic book with it. And no, James Gunn's not going to cancel the Batman Part 2 in favor of The Brave and the Bold or whatever the hell. I'm sure most people are smart enough to recognize this, but a select group of people shared that mentality for whatever reason. James Gunn has nothing but respect for Matt Reeves. His role in DC Studios isn't just limited to working on his universe's Batman projects like The Batman or The Penguin. He seems to have a hand in producing all kinds of Batman-related media outside of his own universe, with him being involved in the Dynamic Duo animated movie set to release in June 2028. Dynamic Duo is a coming of age origin story centered on Dick Grayson and Jason Todd. It hasn't been confirmed whether this movie is an Elseworlds project or set in the DCU. My money is more on it being an Elseworlds movie, as I'm not sure if the DCU would set up such a drastic change in the origins of Dick and Jason from the source material, toppled with the animation studio working on the film, Swaybox Studios, utilizing a technology that's a cross between CGI animation, practical elements of stop motion, and live action real life performances. James Gunn also recently greenlit a Clayface horror movie that's set in the DCU continuity, and Matt Reeves will be one of the producers of the movie alongside Lynn Harris. If you're any kind of business executive and you saw the financial and critical success of the Batman and the Penguin, why would you try to put a stop to that for any reason? You'd be an actual buffoon to do so. With that in mind, you might be wondering why not just merge Robert Pattinson's Batman to cross over into the rest of the DCU. Matt Reeves doesn't want to do that. Simple as that. Lauren LaFranc, who was the creator and showrunner of the Penguin series, talked about how Matt Reeves' version of Gotham City is very grounded, and one of the reasons Batman never showed up in that series was to make sure the spotlight and focus was given to Oswald and the other key characters, who, by the way, does not get enough credit for the success of the Penguin. Everybody's always raving about, oh, Matt Reeves cooked so much with the Penguin. What about the creator and showrunner of the series?
I view it sort of as a grounded character drama of this very complicated man who at times is problematic and he's very smarmy. But I feel like it's really grounded. So there's really no heroes or villains on our show. There's just flawed, complicated people. If Batman comes in, we don't want to steal the spotlight from Oz, and Oz certainly would not appreciate that.
On the possibility of merging Matt Reeves' Batman into the DCU, how do you explain the existence of Damian Wayne? It's highly unlikely Robert Pattinson's Batman had a 10-year-old son who was conceived prior to him becoming Batman. How do we go from seeing this year 2 Batman in his late 20s to then seeing him with a 10-year-old son in a Bat family in the next movie? It's not like James Gunn's going to change his mind on using Damian as Robin, as A, Damian is his favorite Robin, and B, the character's existence has already been confirmed in another DCU project. I just don't see Robert Pattinson wanting to sign on for multiple ensemble films and projects outside of Batman-centric stories. Given what the Penguin has set up in continuing the Batman epic crime saga, I can't really envision a merger ever happening. Oh my god, guys, rumors state that Robert Pattinson will be the Batman of the DCU.
Like that's ever gonna happen. Oh, Lord.
If it wasn't clear already that the DCU's Batman would be more fantastical, a Clayface movie coming out in less than a couple of years from now written by Mike Flanagan is proof enough. Since this is set in James Gunn's world and isn't an Elseworlds project, we know for a fact this is going to be a more traditional, possibly Basil Carlo Clayface monster that can shapeshift because we see the character causing some problems in Creature Commandos. James Gunn really went out of his way to greenlight an entire movie about his freaking chair in the DCU.
Please, James Gunn, sit on me.
Oh. Ooh. God, you look like a pile of shit, but you feel like a pile of clouds.
The movie's being described as a horror tragedy, taking some inspiration from those episodes of Batman the Animated Series, as the writer Mike Flanagan is apparently a big fan of those episodes that delved into Clayface's origin and tragedy. It's aiming to have a budget of around the $40 million range, which is smart to have lower budgets for more experimental projects centered on slightly lesser known characters. If the movie's good and marketed well, I don't see how it couldn't break even. What sense does it make to spend around $150 to $200 million on a Clayface horror movie in a universe that's just starting out? Some have speculated that the Clayface movie could be our first introduction to the DCU's Batman before The Brave and the Bold. I guess there's nothing stopping them from doing that, but I'm leaning more towards that not happening since it's supposed to release only a month before the Batman Part 2, which is subject to change, but the release dates of both films would still probably be close to one another if the Batman sequel gets delayed. I have a feeling they won't even bother in the casting process for Batman until the Brave and the Bold script is complete and the film is ready to be greenlit, taking into account James Gunn's own comments on how Batman won't be cast in the DCU for a while. Then again, it's not completely out of the window for him to show up. Even if there isn't an actor attached to the role, you could still see maybe a silhouette or a bat signal or something. I think it's kind of cool to see the DCU willingly take creative swings like this, exploring different types of genres and aspects of storytelling with characters tied to well-known IPs. People complain about the lack of popular DC heroes getting some of the first projects in Chapter 1. I could have sworn not copying the MCU was a big ask of this new universe and for it to take a unique stand, yet these same people complain that the DCU slate isn't Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, The Flash, Green Lantern, then Justice League, followed by Superman 2, Batman 2, Wonder Woman 2, Teen Titans, Justice League 2, then Aquaman or something. If they did that, y'all would just be whining that James Gunn is copying the MCU format. Wait for it to play out and see what happens. We don't even know every project that comprises Chapter 1. It's not about telling a grand overarching narrative where every movie or show fits in like a piece of a giant puzzle. More than likely, The Brave and the Bold will be our introduction to any of the prominent Bat family members becoming Robin in live action in the past couple of decades. I don't think we're getting Dick Grayson as Robin anytime soon in the Batman universe. Not completely off the table to have a slight tease in the end of the Batman Part 2 or in another project, but no shot will Dick Grayson be introduced and become Robin in that movie. A big reason for Damian Wayne being the Robin of focus in The Brave and the Bold is due to him being James Gunn's favorite Robin, with the story taking inspiration from Grant Morrison's run on Batman, which brought Damian properly into main continuity. It also tells us from the jump how far into Batman's career the DCU will focus on. I know some people were disappointed that Robin wasn't Dick Grayson. When the initial slate for Chapter 1 was announced, I was pretty surprised to see them incorporate Damian Wayne this soon. Looking back on it, I can understand why they'd want to skip over a bunch of the foundations of building a Bat family of sorts. It's really not all that realistic to show the growth of the Batman mythos in real time in its entirety over a series of movies and shows. To start with Dick Grayson first becoming Robin all the way into introducing Damian Wayne. Establishing a new Robin every other movie would probably be jarring for casual audiences. Each Robin's introduction requires development time, which may feel repetitive or drag out Batman's arc across multiple movies if they wanted to spend time on doing, okay, here's Dick Grayson in movie 1, then he becomes Nightwing and Jason Todd gets introduced in movie 2. He dies, then Tim Drake gets introduced in movie 3. Then Jason Todd comes back in a Under the Red Hood type of story. We then move on to Damian becoming the fourth canonical Robin, assuming they'd skip over Stephanie. Even if that process could be fast-tracked, that may not allow for proper development time for each previous Robin. The progression of the Bat family up to the point of bringing in Damian into the fold happens in the span of over a decade. Given how much emphasis James Gunn wants to give to a multitude of other characters, you can see why showing the progression of the Bat family from year 3 to year 12 or something would be improbable. That's not to say say those characters will never get any of the spotlight, however, it leaves room for any prequel projects of allowing some of those characters to shine in other movies or shows. I wouldn't be surprised if Dick Grayson has a role in the Teen Titans movie. Damian's introduction could help fix some of the negative stigma surrounding his character, putting emphasis on the larger character growth seen in the comics, learning how to form relationships and be a better hero, which they'd have to do as they can only keep the arrogant, bratty child bit going for so long before it gets old. The thing about child actors is that they like to grow up incredibly fast, so it wouldn't even be that long before Damian's a teenager. Hell, they could honestly start out with him as a 14-year-old for all we know. Using Damian Wayne as a means of setting the tone for this Batman sort of sets the stage for the kinds of villains we'll see in any hypothetical future Batman projects that are set in the DCU. Case in point, villains like Clayface, who will be getting their own movie, will have the ability to shapeshift. No shot Ra's al Ghul, Talia, and the League of Assassins don't play a role in the Brave and the Bold's narrative, as you'd have to spend time on Damian's backstory, his training and guidance under the League of Assassins since birth, as well as at least mentioning any previous interactions Batman has had with Ra's al Ghul and his immortality with the Lazarus Pit. There are so many wish lists out there on what villains in particular could serve as antagonists in the Batman Part 2 or beyond, assuming Matt Reeves wants to produce more spin-off shows of Batman villains. While integrating certain villains that are usually deemed as more fantastical or superpowered in nature in a more grounded setting could still work, I would rather see those villains in the DCU. Having a show or movie centered on Scarecrow, Professor Pig, Hugo Strange, Mad Hatter, I could 1000% see those guys giving Robert Pattinson's Batman a hard time. But if we're talking about villains like Bane with Venom, Poison Ivy, Mr. Freeze, Clayface, Solomon Grundy, Killer Croc, I don't see the point in making the effort of trying to make them more realistic. You're just making your job a lot harder and trying to make them work. If those more fantastical villains get their own movies or shows, it'd be best to set them in the DCU like Clayface to further establish the kinds of threats that Batman is capable of dealing with when compared to Robert Pattinson's version. Court of Owls would make for some interesting antagonists in Matt Reeves' universe, encompassing just how far Gotham's corruption goes and how it all ties together in this epic crime saga. This may or may not be a hot take, but even with that in mind, I would rather see them as a villain organization in the DCU.
Yo, come on, man. I can't have shit in this house.
An aspect of the Court of Owls that works so well is that Batman doesn't encounter them until later into his career, which is a big deal as Batman believes he knows the city in and out and all of its significant history or any ties to corruption. So it catches him off guard discovering there's been a secret society ruling Gotham from the shadows for hundreds of years and he had no idea about. There's no way the Court of Owls in Matt Reeves' universe would have undead talons or connections to Dick Grayson, Nightwing, and his great-grandfather William Cobb. It'd be interesting for the court to pose as a threat the whole Bat family has to deal with in Gotham. If Matt Reeves wanted to use the court, I would not be mad at it, but I don't see him wanting to use highly trained ninjas with hundreds of years worth of training with superhuman strength and mythical torture mazes that give Batman an acid trip in a way one might expect. Whatever James Gunn's plans for Batman are, or how he intends to execute Batman's introduction, there's no issue with waiting a little longer before seeing the DCU take a crack at yet another Batman. It's going to take a lot of effort to allow audiences to get invested in another version given the reception of the Penguin and the hype surrounding Matt Reeves' vision for the Batman Part 2. Oh, I can't believe we're getting a Clayface movie before Batman.
Okay.
What's the problem with that? We know he's getting a movie. What's the big deal? All I can say is comic readers would benefit greatly from finally seeing a Bat family and fantastical villains come to light in live action.